Hey, VC, how's it going? So we're back again for another Thursday night group discussion, and we have a very special guest with us tonight. We have Brandon from Mr. Hall of Fame. He is a longtime member of the vinyl community. I think he's been in the VC longer than any of us, and so we are delighted to have you. Welcome, Brandon.
What's up, VC? Pleasure to be here.
And I was surprised because Brandon said he's actually seen some of our videos and he still agreed to come on here tonight. So hats off to you. I hope you know what you're getting yourself into. But tonight we are going to be talking about our 5 favorite 80s bands, and we're going to be talking about our 2 favorite songs from each of those bands. So I think we've got a wide variety of different bands that we're going to be talking about tonight. And to start things off, we have, as always, Mr. Chris Profey in his gorgeous Miles Davis shirt. We were talking about that for a while before we started to record the video.
Thank you.
Want to say anything about the shirt before we get into your picks?
Well, I got the shirt for free when they came out with the album Rubber Band. And so, yeah, I got the t-shirt for free, which was cool. So I figured I'd wear it tonight. It makes me look like I know something about music.
Makes you look cooler than you are.
Right, exactly, right? Yeah. You know, anytime you put a Miles Davis t-shirt on, you're already 10 times cooler than you were.
Well, anytime you put a Miles Davis shirt on or a Dio shirt, you look like the epitome of coolness. So
right.
Dio is generally what I wear on first date. So now you know, Jeff. I break out the Dio.
Yeah.
Well, and I broke out the beard tonight because I didn't want to be the only one without facial hair in our group, which I usually am. So I feel like I fit right in.
You do. I think you do.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, Chris, what are we talking about? I forget now.
Favorite 80s bands and songs by those bands.
All right. Well, kick us off.
All right. Well, my first band, I'm going to go the glam rock, glam metal route. And the reason I'm showing this band, not only do I like them, but they are like the epitome of glam metal in the 80s. And also, this was my first concert ever. I saw this band with Tesla, and the band is Poison. And this album was just a favorite of mine growing up, and I'm going to pick 2 songs off this album: Cry Tough and Want Some, Need Some. Right? Yeah. Just want to make sure I was saying that right. But, you know, I think I had a crush on Bret Michaels. I still might have a crush on Bret Michaels today. I mean, they look pretty good on this cover, but all kidding aside, this whole album is great. Even Open Up and Say Ah was awesome following that. Another artist that I listened to a lot in the 80s and still do is Prince. And 2 of my favorite albums, you know, I got to go Purple Rain and I got to go Around the World in a Day. This is probably my favorite Prince record. And of course, the single off this album was Raspberry Beret, but I'm going with the title track, Around the World in a Day. And I'm going with the song I Would Die for You off of Purple Rain. But this album is so cool because it was a psychedelic record. And it was kind of like, you know, how is Prince going to follow Purple Rain? He can't make Purple Rain too. So he went a totally different direction with Around the World in a Day. Really, I mean, I think the only singles were Raspberry Beret, and I believe that Pop Life was a single as well. But the rest of the album is sort of like lesser known Prince songs, but they're so good. I could have picked the song Tambourine as well. I really, really dig that tune. But yeah, Prince definitely had to be in my list.
I love that song Paisley Park also off that record. I think that one's really cool.
Yeah, and that ended up being the name of his record label too.
Yeah. Chris, have you ever worn rouge and lipstick on any of your videos before? Just out of curiosity.
Well, it's funny when when I was younger in the 80s, my friend and I used to, this is going to sound really bad. We made videos and we would lip sync to our favorite songs. So we had his sister, who was a couple years older than us, paint us up with lipstick and makeup and stuff like that. And I think I still have some videos of us. So one of these days, if you guys are lucky, I might break those out and show you. But,
Oh man, upload those to YouTube, my friend. That
will be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You will get the
I-
most
and I-
views ever.
I make I make an ugly woman. I'm just gonna say. Yeah. But yeah, Prince and Poison.
All right. Very cool. Okay, Brandon.
All right. So one of the first ones that comes to mind for me is an artist that I think a lot of times, but everyone knows the name, but I think it's very easy to forget about him until you actually go back and dive into his stuff. And it is the one and only Eddie Money.
Nice.
I think Eddie actually just going to the songs first. I mean, the two songs that I'm going with him is Shaken off of this album here. Then I pulled out his greatest hits to also go with I Want to Go Back, one of his bigger hits from the 80s.
Yeah.
But yeah, especially the song Shaken. I just think that's one of the, quite frankly, the baddest freaking rock songs ever. It just has so many different elements to it, between the way you have the intros on the drums are just not some, steady, consistent beat. It almost has like this build up, something's about to happen type of feel, and it keeps it through the entire song. I mean, Eddie's lyrics are just, to me, just kind of just that pure 80s rock and roll type of lyrics. He's talking about getting in a car, jamming the music, this chick that I love, like she was shaking, she was bad, just the basics of what our hormones were taking us through when we were 16. But yeah, absolutely love that song to death. And then again, I want to go back. One of his bigger 80s hits, I think, that gets kind of, tied in with some of the 80s cheese and stuff like that. But again, it's Eddie's storytelling, it's his laid back but yet powerful vocal delivery. Just a bad dude, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up Eddie Money, because I don't think we've ever talked about Eddie Money, but I adore Eddie Money. His songs were all over the radio in the 70s. And actually, I saw him live about 10 years ago, because he would open up. I saw him at it's now called Pine Knob Music Theater again, but he used to always open the concert season at Pine Knob every year. And one year I was able to catch him, and he's just fantastic. And you forget how many great songs he has. I mean, it's like he could play for 2 hours straight and you would know every song, you would know all the lyrics, you've heard him on the radio. I mean, he was big not only in the 80s, but also even in the late 70s, he was coming out with some just classic rock staples. But Eddie Money, and his just a fantastic voice. I mean, he sounds like no other artist on the radio. Just a unique voice and a unique talent. And unfortunately, we lost him a couple of years ago, but just a great rock and roller.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you were saying there, because that's the pieces. I think, again, maybe people don't play him that often or think about him, but as soon as you throw on a greatest hits, you're singing every single song and going, wow, I forgot how amazing that was. So Eddie's my boy.
Two Tickets to Paradise. I think that was one of the first songs that I ever heard by him, but yeah, just all kinds of great stuff. My second pick is actually, I consider it almost two bands, because I think you have the 70s version of the band, then you have the 80s version of the band, but I'm going with Kiss.
Nice.
80s Kiss. I think sometimes there's a lot of hardcore Kiss fans can so easily brush off the stuff they did in the 80s with Asylum and Animalize and Lick It Up, all that great stuff. But this is arguably my favorite era of Kiss, as much as I adore all of the early stuff. And one of my absolute favorite albums right there, which is Crazy Nights. And so my favorite song off of this album, and again, probably my favorite Kiss song, is Turn On the Night.
Yeah, it's a good song.
I mean,
love that song.
The energy and just the positive, almost, for lack of better terms, happy nature of such a big rock and roll stadium type of song. There's everything about that song just gets me so pumped up and makes me feel good every time I hear it. And definitely one of my favorites there. And the second album kind of showing with that 80s Kiss is going to be Asylum, and Tears Are Falling.
Yeah.
Again, that's one of the songs where it's typical Kiss, but there's something about Stanley's vocal delivery in that song, especially as they fade out towards the end. It's just kind of everything he's doing is what I love about his voice and what he does with Kiss. Is displayed, especially at the ending of that song as it fades out. So those are my two picks for my favorite 80s Kiss songs right there.
Nice.
Well, I'm glad you showed Crazy Nights, because that's definitely a top 5 Kiss album for me. That is a great album.
Awesome album.
And Tears Are Falling, like, I was playing that song for my kids in the car, and my daughter's like, "This is Kiss, Dad?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is Kiss." She's like, "I really like this song." So Tears Are Falling obviously still sounds good today, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Got
and
one of
I love what you. Oh, go ahead, Gary.
Oh, I'm sorry. All I was going to say is Tears Are Falling has one of my favorite Bruce Kulick guitar solos in that. I love that little solo he's got in there.
Yeah.
And what I was gonna say is, I love how you said it like makes you happy, because honestly, like that era of Kiss kind of, to me, encapsulates being, when I first heard it, I was like 14 years old, you know, so it's like, those are like amazing years. So it does bring me back to that nostalgia of that time period where your biggest worry was homework, you know, like before you had real drama.
Right.
right.
Yeah.
I would say I might be getting to them as well.
Okay.
It's very possible.
Yeah, I think there really was a positive vibe to it that I don't necessarily think Kiss, you know, they didn't say that's what it was. But if you look at stuff like, you know, not only Crazy Nights and Turn on the Night, but I mean, I don't know, it's just so much of it. Reason to Live, there's just something positive that's floating underneath it all. And, you know, sometimes you want your rock to be a little more feel good than necessarily just intensity kind of thing. So
Right.
Fantastic stuff there.
Like Burn, Bitch, Burn.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I used to play that song all the time. Sorry.
I kind of liken it to when Slayer came out with South of Heaven. That was sort of their positive album.
That was their feel good album.
Yeah.
Rick Rubin got it out of him somehow. I don't know how he did it.
All right, Gary.
Yeah, the only other thing I want to add on the 80s Kiss is that also had some of Paul Stanley's best vocals was during that time period, you know. It's kind of before he, you know, I mean, now he's has problems, but he was really pushing his voice during that time period. Okay, my first pick is the band Fastway, which of course had Fast Eddie Clark on guitar, Jerry Shirley from Humble Pie was on drums, and Dave King on vocals, who is now in Flogging Molly. These guys came out in 1983, and they put out a small string of albums there that were all really good, including the soundtrack that Aaron's always showing, the Trick or Treat. But the two songs that I picked for my two favorites, the first would be a song called Heft, which is on their debut album. It has that kind of, you know, heavy droning When the Levee Breaks kind of sound to it, you know, and it sounds menacing. It's just a really heavy rocking song, and you know, it ends and they're going Heft, and the dum. It's just great the way it fades out. I love the vocals on it. It's a fantastic song. The next one that I picked is a song off of this, which is their second album. It's called Nonstop Love. And it's a short song, but they managed to do like a time change in the song. It starts out, it's a very up-tempo, very kind of basic rock song. And then all of a sudden it has this part where it just slows down that speed. It's really the same guitar line, but they just slow it down in half. And then it has one of those dramatic breaks, you know, down, 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 and it's just the vocals isolated. They do that a couple times, and it comes back in. They're still playing it slow, and then they do that hesitation vocal again, and then it goes back up to where it's fast. And they do all that within like 3 minutes in some. And it's just one of those songs when it's done, you're like, man, I could listen to that one again, because that song just rocks, and it's just a fun, dramatic. I like songs that have some sort of little dramatic part in it, and they managed to do that in that song. My next pick is one of my favorite artists, and he came around in the 80s. This is his second album here. I'm talking about Stevie Ray Vaughan. Stevie Ray Vaughan, Double Trouble. Blues guitar player and singer out of Texas. Kind of took the world by storm there for a while. Unfortunately, passed away very early. 1990, he was only 35. So, I mean, he had a lot more to give us than he did. But what he did leave us was a fantastic discography. And the two songs that I picked that I really like from him is the title track off of this. The song Couldn't Stand the Weather. Probably because that's the one that I first discovered Stevie Ray Vaughan with. I saw the video, like other people did on MTV. The video was awesome. He's playing in the rain and he's just wailing away on his guitar. And it's got that very cool beginning on that song, where the bass and the drum, doom, 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 then his guitar can go, and he goes into it. It's got that really kind of funky rhythm that he has going over that song. Of course, the guitar solo is great because it's Stevie Ray Vaughan. He could do no wrong on that. And then my second pick would probably be it's off the In Step album. And it's his version of Leave My Girl Alone, which, of course, was a Buddy Guy song. And Stevie Ray Vaughan, like all other blues players, right, they're always doing other people's songs. And Stevie Ray Vaughan, just any remake that he did, any cover version, he just brought it to life. And he sounds very menacing on that song, the way he goes, "You better leave my little girl alone." And he plays the guitar with it, it's one of those vocal guitar line type of songs. And, hey, if you're going to cover a Buddy Guy song, you better damn well have your shit together because Buddy Guy is another fantastic player. Him and Stevie Ray Vaughan were, actually ended up becoming friends. And he totally did that song justice. And it was just an example of how he could do a great cover version of other people's songs. So Fastway and Stevie Ray Vaughan, those are my.
I was a wedding DJ for about 10 years. And during dinner, there was nothing cooler than putting Riviera Paradise on during dinner or another Stevie Ray Vaughan. He's got a couple that are just kind of like slow blues or just kind of mellow. And it's perfect like cocktail music or like dinner music. And I put it on and always somebody would come up and they're like, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Yeah. Like, so satisfying as a DJ because you never knew if people were listening or even paying attention. But I'd always, every time somebody would come up and they'd be like, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Yeah.
Yes,
did you go, like, yeah, brother?
Oh, yeah.
I love it.
Bro, you felt like you were in a fraternity, some kind of secret society, like Stevie Ray.
Oh, yeah. It's still that way, man. I mean, I like a year ago or so, I saw some guy at a restaurant. And he had this cool looking Stevie Ray Vaughan shirt on. But, we sat there and talked for 20 minutes, while my wife is going like, let's go.
Ooh, cool picks, Gary. Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Aaron, your turn.
Okay, before I start, I'd like to say, I'd like to comment about just a little thing on each of yours real quick. On Chris, Poison, I just wanted to mention that I got into them like way before they were popular, that album. I bought that. I had a Poison shirt and, I thought I was cool. I was, 15.
Yeah.
So, before they were popular, and it just kind of brings me back to that, hearing that. And then I'm so happy that you mentioned that that was one of your favorite Eddie Money songs, Brandon, because Ace Frehley covered it on this record. I want to go back, and it's really cool. That's always been one of my favorite Eddie Money songs as well. And I always talk about Heft on Trick or Treat being a little bit better than that. I don't know. I like that version, but they're great. That's one of my favorite Fastway songs as well. So I'm going to start with, so what happened with me, you know, I grew up listening to my parents' music, like most of us do. Well, some of us. And so my favorite bands were the Beatles, Beach Boys, you know, stuff like that. And then about 1983, I discovered this artist here, Greg Kihn Band. This is his first album from the 80s. And then he had this album, which is probably his best album. Yeah. And then continued. And then he ended the 80s with this one, which actually has Joe Satriani on it, which there he is right there. Kind of crazy that he played with Greg Kihn. But in 1983, I kind of was discovering my own music. And this album came out, and the video for Jeopardy just totally blew me away. Yeah. When I saw that video, and I just love that song, and it's really where I started discovering my own love of music was through Greg Kihn, where we're like branched off from my parents' music, and it was the Jeopardy's what started me on that path. And I still think it's an amazing song. I listened to this record on Tuesday. And these Berserkly records, there's something about the production on them. They just blow out of the stereo. They sound amazing, almost like that new Cars one. And so Jeopardy is the one song that really got me going. And then when this album came out, the Citizen Kihn, it's just him solo, but it's a little bit more keyboardish, but it still has that great Kihn sound. And there's a song from here called Whenever, and it's a ballad, and it's one of the best ballads ever made that nobody knows. And I really love the song Whenever. This whole album I really love. It's just, you know, he became my favorite artist. Back in my teens, I was the Beatles up till I was about 13. And then I went through a series of a bunch of artists in a row that were my favorite. Like in my teens where I was discovering stuff. And he was my favorite for a little while. And I still love listening to the Greg Kihn Band. So my second one, and I discovered this band right after Greg Kihn. So they were flip-flopping. And this was their first 80s album. It was El Loco from ZZ Top. But what happened was, like when a lot of people discover them during Eliminator, and it just blew me away. I was like, I love the energy. And, you know, I'm going to have to say, you know, all those big hits are amazing and everything. But the song that really was different for me was TV Dinners. When I saw that video, it was so different. And that song just so different. My dad would go around TV dinners. And it was just kind of a funny thing with our family TV dinners thing. Something about the blue sauce, the sauce is not too blue. That line always cracked me up. And this album just totally blew me away. They became my favorite band for a while. And then this album came out, and I saw them on tour for this. And this is a great record too. It's a little more slick than Eliminator, but it's got some really good stuff on it. And, you know, I was pretty naive. I was young, so I didn't really know what the song was about. But my favorite song on here was Woke Up With Wood. And I still to this day, I still think that might be ZZ Top's best riff. That guitar riff in Woke Up With Wood is so good. And it just blows me away every time I hear it still. It's just high energy. And I still remember that concert, and the whole stage was set up like the dashboard of a car. Lights went out, they had all the lasers, and then it turned into the inside of a spaceship, and really cool laser show. But these are the first two bands that really brought me away from my parents' music, which I still love all that stuff too. But that's where I really started my musical growth, was with Greg Kihn and ZZ Top. And those songs in particular are what really boosted me, I think, from those artists.
That's cool. I think, you know, like the thing about like Greg Kihn or Brandon picked Eddie Money is that music never really sounds like, it just feels like it's always cool. Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't sound dated really. I mean, you know, yeah, they both had albums that had like some kind of 80s touches to them type thing. But the songs themselves are just, they're timeless. They're timeless songs. You know, like you said, I could put on a Greg Kihn record right now and totally enjoy it. You know, I mean, same way with Eddie Money. Both those artists are like timeless artists.
they're kind of similar in a way because neither of them were, Eddie Money was a lot more popular, but they were both kind of like not the very biggest thing. And their music has lasted, both of them, I think, a lot better than some other artists.
Yeah.
They aged well.
But like when I think about things like the breakup song that was also on the album there, and then the stuff we're talking about with Eddie Money, it really just seems like with a lot of those tracks, they were just sticking to rock and roll. They weren't trying to fit into just what the 80s was doing and let's throw in all this synth now. And so like rock and roll just always stays. That just never fades. And two prime examples right there with Money and Kihn.
Yep.
All right, Josh.
All right. So my first artist I discovered on MTV, like a lot of people probably did. And he still makes music to this day. So he's been making music for decades. And that's going to be John Mellencamp. The crazy thing is, and I picked him because you don't see him often in the VC. And to be honest with you, you can buy his albums dirt cheap. Not only can you buy, like, he sells a box set of all his 80s albums and it's like $99, which is like 5 or 6 albums. But the reason why it's $99 is because you could probably go down to your local record store and buy them, most of them for $5 to $10 each, depending on where you live. So I don't think there's a lot of love for his music, and I don't get it because I think that he's a fantastic lyricist. I do think that he's a little crotchety, so he might rub people the wrong way because he's kind of like, once he gets on his high horse, he likes to preach. But the 2 songs that I want to pick is, one is Cherry Bomb. And I don't think I love this song as much as I do now as I did as a child. And the reason why is, back in the 80s, Bruce Springsteen had a big hit with Glory Days. And then he had this hit with Cherry Bomb, which is essentially about the same thing. It's about being young again. But as obviously a man that's close to his 50s now, I can understand it, right? Like I can understand like when he's singing like holding hands meant something, dancing meant everything. And it's like, yeah, you lived for these little things. It didn't have to be the big things. So the song like Cherry Bomb really resonates with me and it's really powerful now. Plus it makes me feel good. It makes me want to dance. And then the next one I'm going to do is off my favorite Mellencamp album, and this is Scarecrow. And I'm going to do Rain on the Scarecrow. I remember being a kid and hearing it on the radio, and I was blown away. And I was like, Dad, I want to hear that again. He's like, son, it's the radio. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, well, I want the album. Like, we need to get the album. And it's one of the only albums I actually own 2 copies of because I found it sealed. And I was like, I love this album so much. I'm just going to buy it because it's sealed. But Rain on the Scarecrow talks about the struggle of the farmers, and how their farms are being taken away. It's extremely powerful. The words resonated with me as a young child. So you can imagine if it can resonate with a 10-year-old, like what's it doing it for an adult? And that's so John Mellencamp. I've seen him in concert. He's really great. He's still great. Still got a great voice. It's a lot more rough now, more like a Tom Waits, but fantastic. So that's my first one. And the second one I'm going to do is probably one of my all-time favorite artists of any decade, and that's Tom Petty. And the songs I picked were, one was Southern Accents, which is my all-time favorite Tom Petty song. And what makes me love this song so much is that his mother had died when he was writing this album, and he was very close to his mother, and he had a very difficult relationship with his father. His father was abusive as a child, and then when he grew up and became famous, his father was touting around, I'm Tom Petty's dad, and Tom Petty resented that. But his mother passed away, and there's a beautiful passage in this song where he talks about, there's a dream I keep having where my mother comes to me and she kneels down over by the window and says a prayer for me. And you could tell how haunted he was by the passing of his mother. It's so beautiful, so touching. I think it encapsulates love unlike any other song. I love it. And then this album, which gets a lot of hate for some reason, because I think because it's got so many superstars that people felt like, oh, this should be like the greatest album of all time. But to me, Tom Petty's writing on this album, The Traveling Wilburys, is just amazing. It's such a fun album. You could tell they were having so much fun. And the song that I'll pick is just the biggest hit, which is Handle with Care. I just think that song always puts a smile on my face, and I love it. So those are my first 2 artists.
Nice picks.
I'd like to add something about John Mellencamp. I could have easily picked him too, and I still to this day think that side 2 of Aha is one of my favorite sides of record of the 80s. It's the one without the hits, but it's just so good. And those albums are great too.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah, and I just have to kind of mention there too, because Mellencamp was one that was on my list to choose, and Rain on the Scarecrow, and just the way that he's able to paint those pictures of real life, much like the way Springsteen does. You know, that line where he says that grandma's on the front porch with a Bible in her hand. Sometimes I hear her singing, "Take me to the promised." Like, I'm getting chills just saying the line right now. It's just so amazing.
Yeah, I concur with that. I mean, if I would have picked Mellencamp, I definitely would have picked Rain on the Scarecrow. And just like you said, I mean, I remember, when it came out and, first seeing the video and everything, and that's what it did, man. It gave me chills, then when music can do that to you, when it can move you like that, that's really something.
Why do you think he doesn't get more love in the VC?
I think part of it is because of what you said. In a way, I think he kind of ended up being kind of known as, just this kind of crotchety guy. And, he's had a few oddball statements and stuff. And, he criticizes his own music. He didn't tour. He didn't tour that much. He said, "I don't want to do my hits." He said, "I'm not a jukebox. I'm not somebody's monkey," things like that. To where I think he rubbed some people the wrong way. I mean, it's his right to do whatever he wants to do. But I think the fact that he spent a lot of years not going out and playing, it kind of took him out of the spotlight a bit. But yeah, he definitely has a fantastic discography.
And it's funny that you said that, because he wrote that song, "I don't want to be no pop singer. I don't want to be no pop star." He blatantly said it.
He kind of is like an older version of Ted Nugent in a way, with how he rubs people and kind of
He's just
love him or hate him.
polarizing. Yeah.
He's like the guy when you were younger and like you'd hit a baseball into his yard and you'd like tiptoe into his yard to go get it. And he'd like come out the front yard, "Get out of my yard, you punk."
Well, here's the last time I saw him on TV get interviewed. I saw him on David Letterman's show. I don't know if any of you guys saw this, but he comes out and he's got like a black eye. He comes out, he's smoking a cigarette, while he's sitting there on the couch talking to David Letterman. And of course, David had to say, "So what happened here?" And he said, "Well," he said, "my son did that." So, he goes, "Yeah, we got in a bit of an argument or whatever." And it's just very awkward. Letterman's kind of like, "Oh," you can tell he didn't know where to go with that conversation. And, I think that, John Mellencamp had a way of making people feel awkward sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anytime it comes to be my pick, I always hear that song from my youth in Sesame Street, where one of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. Because I'm like, oh, you guys are showing classic rock artists, Poison and Fastway. And now I'm up here to be like, okay. I'm going to talk a little synth pop. For a moment. Somebody has to, right? Okay, so I'm going to talk about the first band that I'm going to talk about. In the early 80s, MTV was, all over. Everybody got their music from MTV back then. There were a lot of bands who, you saw the video, and, synth pop was never a thing until like the early 80s. And there were bands who in the early 80s, like they had hits and they were popular. But then as the 80s wore on, it's like, well, how do you stay relevant? Because suddenly the stuff that was all over the radio in 82 and 83 was already sounding like cheesy and dated by like 86, 87. And so this band actually managed to, even though not many people are familiar with their later discography, but they actually progressed, which not many bands could do, progress from like the early synth pop, very much, sounding like bands like Scritti Politti or Yaz or Flock of Seagulls. insert your favorite synth pop band. But over the course of the 4 albums that they put out in the 80s, there was a very marked progression over the course of those. And oh shoot, wrong album, sorry. The band that I'm talking about is, and I did a video about this band, and so people are going to be like, well, I didn't listen to them after your first video, I'm not going to listen to them now, but it's a shame because I think more people need to discover them. I'm talking about Talk Talk, who they had their, you know, their early hit that everybody knows is It's My Life. You know, No Doubt did a cover of it in the 1990s. That was their synth pop hit. It's not off this album, but that was their second album. Their first album was even more kind of synth poppy. But by this album, they were actually starting to show some depth in their production and their songwriting. Mark Hollis was the chief singer and songwriter for this band. And, you know, this was the album where it's like, well, whoa, this doesn't sound like It's My Life or anything off that album. And he was doing what, you know, everybody like heard Radiohead in the 90s and early 2000s, like, oh, Radiohead, they're so brilliant, they're so unique. Well, Talk Talk was doing Radiohead like in the late 80s before, you know, Radiohead even existed. And the thing that I love about it is that they were very serious about their music. And Mark Hollis was almost like the Brian Wilson of the 1980s. He was very meticulous about his production. And every instrument, if you're going to play a note on an instrument, it had to have a purpose. And he was so meticulous about every single note and every single instrument. There's spaces in the music. It's almost like the whole jazz mindset of, you know, it's okay not to clutter your song with a lot of noise and a lot of instruments and a lot of superfluous, you know, just noise to have a song just, you know, flow together. And the song that I'm picking off of here is Life's What You Make It. And it's got a piano melody. It's kind of a chugging rhythm. There's some guitar to it, but it's very atmospheric. You know, it's very much, it's almost cinematic in a way, the way that he constructs a song. And it's so far removed, even from the last album that he did, but it's still enough that it's very much, you know, appealing to the masses. But it's a great pop song. There's some great pop songs off of this album. I'm going with Life's What You Make It. And then the next album was even a further progression from that. This is the album Spirit of Eden, which I heard, and the first time I heard it, I'm like, I just don't get it. Like, I can't, because I was used to the old Talk Talk, and this was as big a leap from the album that I just showed you as like Help was from Rubber Soul. You know, there was like that kind of progression, or the leap from Revolver from Rubber Soul. I mean, this almost sounds, it sounds jazzy in spots, but it's very quiet. There's sparse instruments. It's quiet. There'll be just like silence, and then the instruments will come back in. And then all of a sudden it just gets very loud, but it's all very purposeful and it's so well constructed. And I encourage anybody, if you can find this album, I guarantee if you pick it up, I know nobody will. I'm not under any illusion that anybody's going to see this and be like, oh, I'm going to go grab that. But you know, if anybody, you know, it takes me seriously, grab this, because it's such a work of art. And considering this came out, I think it was like 1988 maybe. I don't think many people bought it, but it is just such a work of art. And each song, and they flow into one another too. It's not like, okay, here's a song and it ends, and then there's another song. They really flow into each other. And it's just such, I don't know, you know, I'm kind of almost at a loss of words for it, but if you like kind of like experimental jazz, Ornette Coleman even is somebody I might compare it to, but it is such a cool album. It's such a cool listening experience. And it's so out of time because nothing else sounded like this in 1988. And anybody who's heard it, I mean, they know it's sort of like a secret society where, oh yeah, like, you know, if you know this band, if you know this album, you know how cool they are. Mark Hollis, you know, I mentioned in a previous video, he had just passed away a few years ago, but you know, he actually kind of quit music after the follow-up to that album, which is called Laughing Stock, which was a shame because he was such a brilliant, you know, artist, brilliant songwriter, brilliant composer, but just nobody, you know, he wasn't doing what people expected, and he was doing the music. You know, one of those artists you hear, well, he just made the music he wanted to make. He didn't care what people were buying or what people wanted from him. He made music that he was interested in. And I make that comparison to Radiohead because it's like, you know, Radiohead and their jump from the Bends to OK Computer, and then all of a sudden Kid A. It's like, whoa, where did that come from? Like, there's no continuity there, like the Bends, and then like OK Computer, what the hell? And then Kid A, you didn't think it could get any farther, any more experimental than OK Computer and Kid A. But, you know, Mark Hollis with Talk Talk was doing all that stuff in the late 80s. So, you know, if you like Radiohead, you dig Radiohead, you got to check out Talk Talk. So that's my first pick. My second pick, and Aaron, you had mentioned ZZ Top and, you know, their first album, the 80s, El Loco. And interestingly enough, in 1980, they toured England, and they were on, I think it was Top of the Pops or one of those British shows. And they were on the bill with this artist, and they heard this band, and like a light bulb went off, like, this is the future of our music, synthesizers and keyboards. And the band I'm talking about is Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, OMD. They go by sometimes. But they were very much influenced by Kraftwerk. Their early albums are very much derivative of Kraftwerk, where it's pure electronica. Everything is synthesized. It's all drum machines and music. But you know, they're again another band that incorporated different elements in their sound. This particular album is Junk Culture. I think it came out in 1985. But you've got steel drums on here. You've got horns. It's just a very diverse palette of music that they have on here. But the track that I'm going to go with, the first track that I want to talk about is called, this is actually the 12-inch single, is Tesla Girls. And yes, it's the same Tesla as the band Tesla. We're referring to Nikolai Tesla. But, you know, OMD went from being a synth pop band, but they elevated synth pop. This is not like Scritti Politti synth pop, or this is not Pet Shop Boys synth pop. This song, Tesla Girls, is the equivalent of The Song Remains the Same by Led Zeppelin. And if you hear it, it's sort of like a synth pop, The Song Remains the Same, because there's this entire build up before the vocals actually come in. It's just brilliant. I mean, it's got so many, it's almost like it goes through all these movements, and then like the vocals come in and you're like, oh my God, like now there's vocals. And then it's just such a fantastic bit of mid 80s new wave synth pop. And this album, you know, again, I can't recommend strongly enough. I think it's great. Talking Loud and Clear was another single off here. But there's so many different like Caribbean rhythms and just different sound textures on here that are really fantastic. And then the second song that I'm going to pick, you know what? I didn't even mention, because I got so wrapped up, but the song Desire. Desire is a song off of here, my second song, sorry. The second song I'm picking from OMD is actually going to be a song called Motion and Heart. I actually sent the CD to Josh. I don't know if you got into it or whatever, but you know, it's kind of got a shuffle rhythm to it, but they have like these really dark atmospheric keyboards on here. And I love the cover of this album. There's also a cover where it's like outlined in black on here, but I just love this because this picture just epitomizes the music that you hear. It's very dark. It's very atmospheric. They use synthesizers in such a very cool way that is not the way the Pet Shop Boys or Soft Cell or even Yaz were using them, where it's like, oh, music you can dance to. It's very much to set a mood. I'm going on too long here, and I apologize. I'm taking up way too much time. But anyway, Motion and Heart and Tesla Girls from OMD. Sorry.
Good job. I wish you had a little bit more passion for music, Jeff.
Yeah.
I know I'm so flippant about all these tracks, but you know.
Right. No, and in all seriousness, though, I definitely need, because the way you were describing Talk and OMD, that sounds right up my alley. So I need to definitely get. When you said Ornette, you had me at Ornette Coleman.
Yeah, me too.
So I need to definitely get Talk, and I need to definitely get OMD.
Yeah, you won't be sorry you did. I promise you that. Okay, you're next two, Chris.
All right. Well, I can't say so much good stuff like Jeff did, but I'm going to try to talk about these guys here. So I had a lot of skater friends when I was younger, and I was a poser. I could not skate, but I watched them skate, and I listened to their music. And I was going to show Black Flag, but I always show Black Flag. So I'm going to show the Dead Kennedys. And this is their album, Plastic Surgery Disasters. And then another favorite album of mine, of theirs, is Frankenchrist. The Dead Kennedys were such a unique band. I mean, not only were they a political band, but just their music, the guitars, I was listening to them today, they almost have like a surf quality to their music, which is sort of strange. You wouldn't normally associate surf music with punk, but listen to those guitars in the Dead Kennedys songs, and there's definitely a surf vibe there. But one of my favorite songs is off of this album. It's called Winnebago Warrior, and it's about, from the title you can tell it's about traveling through the country, and there's a really funny line about feeding Doritos to the bears, which I thought was really cool. Jello Biafra had this unique voice. He had a unique way of presenting the songs. Just a really cool band. I got this for my birthday, and I remember putting it on, and my parents were like, "What is that?" So, which made me like it even more. And I'm gonna go with the first song off of Frankenchrist, called "Soup Is Good Food." And I always loved this cover too. And as a kid, I'm like, "Who are these guys?" I didn't know anything. It doesn't say Dead Kennedys on here anywhere.
They got sued for that cover, didn't they? Didn't they have to get a lawsuit from the Shriners?
There was actually a drawing inside the album. This is a repress, so I don't have it, but I think I'm trying to remember even what the drawing was, but it was a very just inappropriate drawing on the inside inner sleeve. I think it was a poster actually, but even the hype sticker here says "Still Surviving the Censors." So I'll have to look up exactly what it was again, but the Dead Kennedys just sort of pushing the envelope of punk. I was going to show Metallica, but I always talk about Metallica, so I won't show Metallica. But I'm going to show this artist, and when I think 80s, I think of this female artist, and the two songs that I'm going to talk about, I still sing in the car like I'm a little schoolgirl, and it's Madonna. And this album is killer, 1983. And I also love True Blue as well. I could have picked any song off of this record, but I'm going with my two favorite Madonna songs, Lucky Star and Borderline. And listen, if I lose subscribers over that, I don't care, because Madonna freaking rocks, and Lucky Star and Borderline, I'm sorry, those two songs are amazing. So I had to mention Madonna, but I mean, I could have picked any song off this album. Papa Don't Preach, Live to Tell, True Blue, La Isla Bonita. Come on.
Well, Madonna grew up in Rochester, Michigan, which is the next city over. They're like the neighboring community to Troy, Michigan. And so all growing up, it was like, oh, Madonna, she's a hometown hero. And, we never heard the end of that. But Madonna's early stuff, especially, there's no shame in listening to Madonna.
And I'm going to show you why I wasn't popular, because I had these two records. The skaters were like, why the hell do you have a Madonna record? And the Madonna fans were like, who the hell are the Dead Kennedys? So, but there you go.
Live to Tell is my favorite Madonna song by far. Easy.
Yeah. I still listen to Madonna. I love Madonna.
I just recently we we were out of town and we stopped at a Goodwill. Of course, you know, you can never find records there. I can't, but I did find a Madonna Greatest Hits, that Immaculate Conception,
Yep.
for like $1 or something. And we were playing that on the way home, and it's just like song after song, you know, you're just singing along with it. She just had a lot of really good pop songs, you know, I mean, just
Yeah.
great songs.
I'm going to mention this album. What were you saying, Aaron?
I said crazily, I actually have an original sealed copy of that.
Awesome.
So
I'm going to mention one of her albums. It didn't come out in the 80s, but it's from 2003. It's called American Life. It's another one of my favorite Madonna records. It's so cool. It sounds totally different. It's electronic, and it's definitely got a heavy vibe to it. But what's cool about it is she has like this acoustic guitar in most of the songs. And then underneath the acoustic guitar, you have these electronic beats. So it's such a cool combination of those two instruments. But American Life is definitely an album people need to check out.
Yeah, I totally support you on that pick, because, you know, somewhere along the line, there's some song by Madonna that everybody has a love for on some level, like whether you want to admit it or not. So I still think Into the Groove is probably one of the best dance tracks ever made. Like when that song comes on, I cannot sit down and I shake my body in ways I just should not be shaking.
Well, the other thing too, and we can all agree on this one, all the girls wanted to be Madonna when we were growing up. They were all wearing the bracelets and doing their hair like Madonna. So, you know.
Yeah.
The lace gloves. Yeah.
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 Yeah. There you go.
And apparently, according to Chris's video, he had makeup and lace gloves on also.
I did.
Chris wanted to be Madonna.
Yeah, listen, I will stand up on the top of a mountain and I will scream, "I love Madonna." I don't care. I'm just crazy like that.
Well, we love you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
My next pick will be cooler.
All right, so my next two, and I have to mention Pat Benatar got bumped for this pick. 'Cause I do love some Pat, but I had to go with my boy Rod Stewart.
Wow.
Rod. I mean, I think he gets most of his popularity, you know, from a lot of his earlier stuff with Maggie May, Reason to Believe, and all those fantastic great hits. But 80s Rod is just right where he was meant to be. And I think for me, the biggest thing I love about Rod Stewart is he's basically just doing Motown in almost everything that he did. He just brought it to the rock and pop scene and kind of, you know, made a tremendous career out of it. But if you go back and really think about a lot of the great acts from the Motown time frame, and just imagine, which I've done so many times, a lot of those artists singing and doing Rod Stewart songs, they would fall right into place. And I remember noticing that way back when I first started listening to the Faces, and you listen to stuff like Devotion and songs like that, and you see it's just like Rod is just singing Motown, and that's all he's doing. And it's just such a, with the beautiful melodies and everything that Motown was about, he just brought that and put it on top of great guitar riffs, great synth stuff, and it was just two beautiful things coming together. And I think this album right here is probably the one that sums that up the most. So for me, the song I'm going to pick off of here is Lost in You, which is the opening track. And again, just kind of a nice big opening, and Rod, again, just bringing all those elements to the table that I was mentioning. But if you dive into other songs on the album, such as Forever Young, Try a Little Tenderness, My Heart Can't Tell You No, When I Was Your Man, all Motown up and down. And this is just a fantastic album. I never get tired of listening to this thing. So Lost in You is going to be the pick off of that album. And then his album that came out right after that in '86, this one here, you know, again, a number of good tracks that you can pick off of this album too. But and actually, I'm almost changing my mind, but I think I'm gonna have to go with Love Touch.
Nice.
I was actually in Lowe's the other day looking for a few things, and this came on overhead, and I caught myself looking up and down the aisle because I had to get a move on. I was like, I hope nobody's watching me. I cannot sit still while this song is playing. And the same thing is just that beautiful R&B soulful delivery that Rod brought to rock and roll. So 80s Rod, absolutely fantastic.
Well, I think Rod Stewart was doing Motown as early as Every Picture Tells a Story, because didn't you do a cover of the Temptations' I'm Losing You off that album?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it was always in his blood. It was just a part of him. He just brought it to rock and roll. So that's my first pick. And my second pick, when you talk about one of these kids doing their own thing, that's definitely a theme song that's followed me around quite a bit in my life. And I've told the long story before about when I moved from a town where I was growing up where everyone looked like me and went to a place where no one looked like me. And I was put into a totally different new culture, a culture shock as far as pop culture. And a friend of mine was starting to introduce me to hard rock and metal and all of this. And I'm like, I've never heard of a Queen or a lead what? You know, and he starts shoveling all this music to me. And I'm just like in overload of what is this amazing stuff. And one of the albums that he really just drilled into me at that time was Twisted Sister Stay Hungry. And this is still by far one of my favorite, you know, glam / hard rock type of albums. It just really represents that magical time for me when I went from only knowing about R&B and gospel to metal, glam metal, hard rock, and all that great stuff. And this album was totally the gateway for that. Every single song off of it is fantastic, but the two songs I'm going to pick, which are both off of this album, is going to be Burn in Hell and Don't Let Me Down. I love both of those tracks, you know. And then this is truly an album that you put on and listen to from start to finish, and you just think every single song is amazing. Yes. Every single song takes me back to some childhood memory that was on some hot sunny day that was back when life was easy and made a little bit more sense, and it was just awesome. So that's going to be my two songs will come off just this one album for this pick. But
when they were outrageous in a way, Kiss was outrageous back in the 70s. You know, I remember seeing them on MTV because I Want to Rock and We're Not Going to Take It were the big videos back then. And it was like, holy shit, who is that guy? You know, what in the hell? You know, because I hadn't seen anything like that since Kiss. And you thought, like, this guy's even more outrageous than even, you know, Kiss looked. But
yeah.
You don't know how. I was like, if I was going to go all metal, that was going to be one of my picks. So close to using, and Burn in Hell was going to be one of my songs too. It's
really nice.
I completely agree. I had Twisted Sister in my hand, and Burn in Hell would have definitely been my song. That's my jam on that album.
Yeah, it's just that intro, like that slow little storytelling, and then it's you're gonna burn in hell. Yes, I am.
Well,
so good.
Sorry,
I would have picked Leader of the Pack, so that's just me. Didn't they cover Leader of the Pack on Come Out and Play?
I do like that album. It's not as good as Stay Hungry, in my opinion, but
I'm just kidding.
It's a good album.
My favorite's always Under the Blade, but Stay Hungry, Under the Blade, You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, that whole trio there is just amazing. And Come Out and Plays, that has some really underrated songs on it. They were actually doing Leader of the Pack back before they did the Blade. That's one of their oldest songs they did.
Yeah.
Well, Love is for Suckers is great too.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And indeed, Hot Love. I love that track.
Yeah.
Wake Up the Sleeping Giant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great stuff. That's my two.
All right. Well, before I make my picks, I just want to say two things. One is, Jeff, like even when you're talking about bands that I don't know, you know, I think we all appreciate anybody that's very passionate about some sort of band they like, whether we like them or not, or whatever. I mean, I can get into somebody talking about why they love a band, what it means to them. So I think that's always cool, you know, regardless of if it's somebody I have any interest in or not. And Brandon, you've inspired me the next time I'm crate digging, because like that Rod Stewart album you showed, that first one, I know I see that in the bins, and I never think about it. I never pass it up. But the way you talked about it, I'm like, yeah, if I find that sucker again for $5, I'm grabbing it.
Nice.
And I'm also going to try to make an effort to find some Eddie money, because I see those sometimes, and I don't think to take. I did the same thing with Aaron when I was picking up some great Kihn, because that was just an act that I forgot about, and he kept talking about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, you buy these albums, these are good, and they're normally cheap, you can find them cheap.
Nice.
Okay, let's see. My first pick is a band that kind of like Josh was saying, maybe not necessarily known for this decade as much, but to me, this was a strong decade for this band, and I'm talking about the Ramones. So to start out the 80s, they did End of the Century and Pleasant Dreams, which were too overproduced for Ramones records. They had too much of a kind of a poppy production to them that took away from the songs, and they weren't necessarily the best songs. But then they came back in 83 with Subterranean Jungle, which was basically not only a return to form, but a little bit of seeing what was to come for the Ramones. Now, obviously, we know the Ramones, and we know they're never going to all of a sudden have a rock opera or anything like that. But they did change their sound a bit in the 80s. And I think it started with Subterranean Jungle and then took another leap with the album Too Tough to Die from 1984, which is where one of my songs comes off of, is the title track, Too Tough to Die. That was written by Dee Dee Ramone, and I just think it's just a badass song. And it's a little bit of, they added more rock to their sound, and they had different tempo changes, and that's an example of it. Still a very short song, it's the Ramones, but they started adding like a little bit of guitar licks sometimes to some of their songs, as opposed to just a bar chord going 90 miles an hour. And then my second pick would be off of Animal Boy, and it's the song Somebody Put Something in My Drink. Yeah. Now that's one where, like, if you would listen to that song and the way Joey Ramone is singing it and compare it to like something off of Road to Ruin, you think, wow, man, this is like totally different, because like it's very raw. There's a great version on this. This is one of my prized records. Aaron actually gave me this. This is a live record. And what I love about this record, it's so perfect for me, is that it has it's a live record that's more of a retrospective. It's got stuff from the 70s and the 80s, and it's got the song Somebody Put Something in My Drink, which was actually written by Richie Ramone, who was a drummer who replaced Marky Ramone, who, if you notice the funny thing on this album cover, so Dee Dee and Johnny and Joey, they're all over here, and Marky's looking out this window, and basically they were kicking him out of the band. They knew they were kicking him out of the band. At that time, he had some bad vices and stuff that were messing him up, and Johnny told him, yeah, you're out of the band. So that's why they put his picture over there by that. But 80s Ramones, to me, it's just as important to me as all those classic 70s Ramones albums. They were just as good. I was riding around in my car doing whatever, cranking out all those Ramones records during that time. And unfortunately, they are super hard. I was lucky to find this. 80s Ramones records are hard to find. I know they have the box set coming out on Record Store Day, but that's $100 and some bucks. It's like I have a couple of those records already that are in there, but Too Tough to Die and Halfway to Sanity are the really tough ones. There's a part of me that is almost considering buying that damn box set just so I can have those records because I love that. I love that era of the Ramones. So
well, I think the movie Pet Cemetery kind of introduced them to a new generation of fans, you know, because the Ramones music was featured very prominently on that soundtrack. And I think that might have been actually the first time I heard the Ramones was, you know, the title song, and Sheena as a punk rocker, you know, that was like, oh, who is this? This is awesome.
Pet Cemetery's on here too.
Ask you, Gary, because that Pet Cemetery came off the album Brain Drain. What year was Brain Drain? Was that 80s too?
Yeah, that was like 86, 7.
That's a great album. I'm glad you talked about Too Tough to Die is one of my favorite Ramones records. Really good album.
Yeah, it's a good one.
You just sold, Gary, you just sold like 10 of those box sets on Record Store Day. Now it's getting even harder for us to find.
Well, hey, you know, whatever, it goes to the estate of the Ramones since, you know, they're all gone. Okay, my next pick is an artist that is definitely known during the 80s, I would think. And that is Joan Jett. Joan Jett and the Blackhearts.
Nice. Good pick.
Of course, you know, she came out of the Runaways and went solo. Wasn't having any luck. Nobody really gave a crap about Joan Jett. And then, as we know, you know, went and produced her own album, did the Bad Reputation album, and then went on and had a little album called I Love Rock and Roll after that. And suddenly everybody loved Joan Jett. Like everybody else, I discovered Joan Jett right around that time and started listening to it and realized that I liked the whole albums. It wasn't just, you know, those hits. Joan Jett does a fantastic job of just combining punk rock, 60s pop rock, you know, in there, and then just some hard rock. She's got a voice that, you know, she can crank it out, and she also can sound very tender in some of her songs, surprisingly enough. I know the image that she has, but like some of her ballads, she has a very vulnerable voice that she can use. So the two songs that I am picking are, the first song comes off of her album from 1983 that was just called Album. The song called Handyman, which is kind of an example of what I'm talking about, because when it first starts out, she's kind of singing it in, you know, it's a fast song, but she's singing this kind of soft voice. And then the next verse, it's like in, you know, you know, kind of thing that she's singing it. And it's a very sexual song. Joan Jett had some songs like that. You know, she had some real poppy ones. She had some very suggestive songs. This was one of the suggestive songs. And then the next song I picked because it's another example of what she did. And it's the song I Want to Be Your Dog, which was by the Stooges originally, but Joan Jett is known for doing a lot of cover songs, right? And kind of making them her own. And I have always loved her version of this song. I've seen her do it in concert several times. And she has a point in there, you know, when I go back to my little dramatic parts where, you know, she's talking about, you know, now we're going to be face to face. And she'll say that. And then the music comes back in, then it stops. She says her line, music comes back in. And then when she's done that last line there, she's singing and the drums keep going. They don't hesitate. And then she comes back in, she goes, I'm going to lay right down in my favorite place. She goes, yeah, you know where that is. And she goes, now I want to be your dog. How can you not love that? I mean, it's just pure fun rock and roll. You've got this rocker chick singing these tough ass songs. And Joan Jett, to me, was one of my favorite artists of the 80s. And those are two of the songs I'm going to pick from.
Great pick. Great pick.
Fantastic, man. Great picks.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think the 80s was a really good time for female rock singers. I mean, up to that point, you had Heart. That was kind of the only time you heard female rock singers on the you know, rock radio. And then you had Pat Benatar, and you had Berlin, you had you know, obviously Joan Jett, and you know, there were others. I mean, you had
Lita Ford.
Yeah,
Missing Persons.
Yeah, and missing
persons. Yeah, Lita Ford.
The Pretenders. So yeah, 80s were a great time.
Yeah, they were, and that's a really good point. Yeah, there were more and more females leading bands, and it was just became more and more accepted. It wasn't just like, you know, well, it's a novelty kind of thing. It was, you know, no, man, these are like, hey, you know, do I want to listen to Devo or do I want to listen to Missing Persons? You know, I don't know. They're both great. You know, it didn't, you were becoming more and more adjusted to that fact. And it was, you know, just cool. It was great. So that's why it's probably one of my favorite eras.
I think you have to give credit to,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say you have to give credit to Heart also, because I think they pioneered the way of
Sure,
ladies that kicked ass. But go ahead, Brandon.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I think with the 80s too, with, you know, MTV and the videos and everything coming around, that really played in favor of the ladies. And not even from a standpoint of like, oh, now we can put sexy looking ladies on the screen, but just kind of, you actually got to see, hey, these chicks can do it just the way these dudes can do it. Like, you're seeing it right here in front of you. Like, you're not watching someone in a dress sitting behind a microphone being all timid. Like, these ladies will kick your ass as much, if not more, than half the dudes that you admire so much.
Yeah, I mean,
like, they had a chance to show how bad they were.
Yeah, there was definitely, you know, that's a good point talking about MTV and stuff, because obviously there was a sex appeal factor that maybe would bring guys like us, you know, to look at a particular band that maybe we wouldn't have before. But it's the music that makes you, you know, stay. It's like I have artists that I still like, whether it's Lita Ford or Blondie, you know, with Debbie Harry. And, you know, I will have people say, well, you know, why would you want to see them now? Because I'll talk about wanting to see them in concert. They're old now. And I'm like, I have no problem going to see the Rolling Stones. You know what I mean? What if they're old now? What matters? This is the artist I fell in love with. You know, yeah, I might have first looked at them because I thought they were hot, but it's the music that matters, that makes you stay. So
Right.
Yeah, you guys, you didn't mention the all-female band Brittany Fox either.
Well, we already talked about Poison, so I thought that covered it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love
some of the best music coming out of the early 80s. I mean, you know, let's talk about Eurythmics, you know, Quarter Flash. I mean, so many. I mean, I can't even name them all, but it was definitely
Warlock.
Yeah.
Such great stuff. Oh.
So I actually went with the top 5 bands from back in the 80s that influenced me the most back then. And it is my turn, right? I think.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. I'm a little scattered around here. So of course I had to go with my favorite band, and I took a really odd route for this band because I grew up, you know, all through the 70s, but I never really paid attention to them until the 80s, and that's Kiss. And these are their albums from the 80s. I'll show them and go through my songs. You know, every one of them I love. But then when it gets to this one, this is where I first really got into Kiss, was during Asylum. I was 15 years old, and I remember I went over to my best friend's house. He lived across the street from me, and he was the guitarist of our band, and he ended up being a singer. But I went over to his house, and they had MTV on, and I distinctly remember Who Wants to Be Lonely being on, the video being on, and his dad even liking it. It's like, I was like, oh my God, I love this song. This Who Wants to Be Lonely. And, you know, it was that and Tears Are Falling were right neck and neck. But Who Wants to Be Lonely was just the one that was a little less known. And like Tears Are Falling, just how Paul sings that song. He just has all this emotion and energy in it. And they became my favorite band. And then they were my favorite band until I discovered Clutch. You know, after, you know, it's just, they're still my second favorite band. I love Kiss, but Who Wants to Be Lonely, I'm going for. And then by the time this album came out, they were my favorite band. So this is the first album released while they were my favorite band. And I absolutely love this record. And every song, I really love Hell or High Water. It's one of my favorites on here, actually. I really love that song. I remember seeing Reason to Live in live when I saw them on tour for this. That was amazing. But every song on this I love. And of course they had this record, which I actually love the 2 extra songs on it too. And this album came out and they were my favorite band. And me and my friends, I know a lot of people don't like this album, but I absolutely love this. It's my favorite album they did in the 80s. This and Creatures of the Night, Neck and Neck, Asylum. I don't know. They're all so good. Crazy Nights, every one of them. Look it up. I absolutely love the Kiss, the 80s Kiss, and it holds a really strong place for me. But this album here, we would just have this on a loop, driving around, doing funny stuff in the car, whatever, having a drink, maybe something else, and just listening to this over and over. But after the first day, we're singing along to every single song. And the song that really grabbed me right away was Hide Your Heart, because I really felt like it was a throwback and it almost mixed the 70s and the 80s Kiss sounds together, where it could have been almost released in the 70s, that song. It just had that sound to it. And then, but it was more modern. And I just, I still to this day will fight anybody that doesn't like this. Not really. I will mentally fight over it.
You'll walk right up and smack him in the face and walk away.
I saw the tour for that. It's still my favorite concert I've ever seen was the Hot in the Shade concert. It was just such an amazing show. Slaughter opened up. It was really cool. And then, so I'm going Hide Your Heart. And I was going to do Tears Are Falling, but Who Wants to Be Lonely, because they're neck and neck with me. And so around that time, I also got into this band. Like I said, my favorite band was flipping back and forth during the 80s until it settled down and became Kiss going forward. But then this band came out and it changed me because I never heard, that was the first band that I heard. It was a thrash band that I liked. Before I was just into like Kiss, it was like the heaviest stuff like that. And then I heard this album. I got it on accident because I was in the Columbia Music Club, and it was the first record, where you got the they send you the record of the month. And this was the first one I got, was this on cassette. And then I got Queensryche's Rage for Order was the next month, I remember. And I discovered both those bands through that before they canceled me for not paying because, I was a kid in the 80s. But when I first heard this and put this on, and Wake Up Dead came on, I was just like, what is this? I've never heard anything like this. That singing at the beginning, then it's almost a complete instrumental that keeps having all these time changes, but it kept you interested at the same time. And so Wake Up Dead is what I'm going for. But this whole album, of course, I love. It's what got me into this. This was the gateway for me for, then I got into Metallica, Anthrax, and Death Angel were my next 3. And from then it went on, and I love, all that whole style of music.
Nice.
But then this album came out, and this totally blew me away as well. And I'm going with In My Darkest Hour because it was so different from Megadeth. They slowed it down a little bit, but it was still heavy. And then it kicked in at the end. And In My Dark Hour is like my favorite song for Tears. I would just tell them, you got to hear this Megadeth song, and keep playing it for people. And this is just an aggressive record that's kind of overlooked in their catalog. And I really love this album. Stuff like Hook and Mouth and Mary Jane just has a different feel to it. Love this stuff. So I'm going with those songs from Megadeth. And there we go.
Awesome,
man.
Can't argue with those picks
at all.
Yeah,
Great
Peace Cells is how I got into Megadeth. That was the album I discovered, and I was on board from that point on too. So great picks, man.
Kill 'em all was how I got into Megadeth.
There you go. That works. He wrote 4 songs on there.
All right, so my next pick is one of my favorite albums of the 80s. It's hard to pick one song because I absolutely love every single song on this album. Much like Stay Hungry that Brandon picked. And I know Gary, this is one of his favorite albums of all time. And that's going to be Whitesnake, Slide It In.
Oh, yeah.
I love Whitesnake. And when this album came out, I loved it. When 87 came out, I loved it. And then all of a sudden they started putting out all older Whitesnake albums, and I was like, these guys have more albums. I was shocked because there was no internet back then. So for the song of this, I'm just gonna pick "Slide It In" because it's such a fantastic song. I mean, it kicks off the album the right way. And it's such a fun song with David Coverdale's great vocals. I love both versions too. I know that there's the European version, the US version. I do gravitate to the US version, but "Slide It In," that's my first one. And then the next one, I'm going to talk about this, which, when after 87, they started to release the older Whitesnake albums in the United States. I grabbed this, and the first song of this is "Fool for Your Lovin'," which obviously they've redone. But to hear the original version is just really killer. They're more of a blues band, more of a Led Zeppelin type. But if "Burn" by Deep Purple was a Whitesnake album, that would be my favorite Whitesnake album. So I love the old Whitesnake. Both of them are just fantastic. So that's my pick. And then my next band is going to be a band that I discovered because I was a huge Misfits fan. And when the Misfits broke up, Glenn Danzig created a band called Samhain. I actually had to order the albums. I remember I went and visited my sister in Boston. She was going to Emerson College, and went to Tower Records, which is like 7 floors, and they had Samhain. I'm like, oh my God. Back then CDs were like $18. I couldn't afford it. So I went to my local Sam Goody and they ordered it for me. It doesn't sound like the Misfits. It doesn't sound like Danzig. It's kind of in between if you've never heard it. The song I would recommend, this is my favorite one, which is called "November Coming Fire." But my favorite song on here is called "Mother of Mercy," and it starts off like a real doomy type of Black Sabbath, where Glenn is singing in a lower register. He's like, "Mother of Mercy," but then they kick into his normal, "We all want our time in hell." And it's a kind of a hybrid of a Misfits or a Danzig chorus. It's fantastic. That song is just a masterpiece. And if you love the Misfits on this album, they're the closest they never got to a Misfits type song was "All Murder, All Guts, All Fun" on Initium. Fantastic song if you like the Misfits. And but Samhain is a good in between. You can see the evolution, and you can also see how Rick Rubin, he went and saw Samhain live and was able to take that and create those first couple Danzig albums, make them a little bit more blues oriented. So those are my picks: Whitesnake and Samhain.
Glad you
My
chose. I love
Whitesnake.
What's that?
Those are my 2 favorite Whitesnake albums you showed there.
Me too.
Oh, awesome.
Me too.
Yeah. I might go along with that.
Just slide it in and slow and easy. I mean, it's just
Oh yeah.
2 of just the easiest, just it's like dirty rock and roll without being dirty, but dirty. It's just,
Yes,
love
completely. Yeah, all the undertones. Yeah, and it's such fun music. I love David Coverdale. He seems like he loves life. It's like it's hard. It's infectious. Yeah.
David Coverdale is what you want a rock singer to be, man.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Well, I'll try not to talk for a half hour this time, but so growing up, junior high into high school, I was a huge Beatles fan growing up. No surprise there, but the bands that I was listening to was anything that was on the radio or kind of hand-me-down records from relatives. I was listening to Boston and Foreigner and Fleetwood Mac and bands like that, just kind of like generic, what you call it, kind of corporate rock. And my uncle, who had always kind of been my musical idol because he had like every Beatles album and, he was a big Rolling Stones fan. So I very much, looked up to his record collection. And he moved to Cincinnati when I was in high school, and we made the drive there, which it's about a 4-hour drive. And when I was there, he gave me 4 cassettes, and they were all cassettes by a band I'd never heard of. It was a band called R.E.M. And they were never a band I'd heard on the radio. They were not even on my radar. I'm like, who the hell is this? And so I had my Sony Walkman cassette player, and on the drive back to Michigan from Cincinnati, I was listening to this, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, it was blowing my mind because I'd never heard music that was, it sounded like the jangly pop of the Byrds, but he was mumbling. You couldn't understand what the lead singer, Michael Stipe, was saying. And it was also, there were some punk rock elements to it. And it just blew my mind because I never realized that there was a universe outside of what I had heard on either classic rock radio or just even top 40 radio. And so R.E.M. was the first, quote unquote, alternative or even new wave band that I was kind of exposed to. And since that time, I have been just a huge R.E.M. fan. And so the first song that I'm going to pick is off their third album, Fables of the Reconstruction, or Reconstruction of the Fables, because they were very clever in that way. It could be, the title could be either way. But it's a song called Can't Get There From Here. And it's so different from anything that's on Murmur or Reckoning, their first, LPs. And it's got a cool rhythm to it. The video is so do it yourself. If you watch it, if you look it up on YouTube, it's so like embarrassingly like lo-fi compared to what was on MTV at the day. And that just sort of made it cooler because it's like, nobody knows about this band. I felt like I was, there was like some secret with R.E.M. that I was just becoming exposed to. But this is the 12-inch single for Can't Get There From Here. But it was on this album. And when I say, well, it's either Fables of the Reconstruction or it's Reconstruction of the Fables, but it's definitely a departure from their first two albums, but just something about that track. I love Michael Stipe sings in a way that he hadn't sung before. When the world is a monster. Yeah, it's just sort of like a weird, if you're familiar with Murmur or Reckoning, his voice is just so different in that. And it's just got a real cool rhythm to it. And it was a single, but I just love it. And, reading some of R.E.M.'s history, they really were almost on the verge of breaking up because they just couldn't get it together for that album. It was almost like their soft grade album where it wasn't gelling in the studio and they weren't even sure that they were going to get an album out of it. But it's such a great album. It's such a great song. And then another song that blew my mind, and this is the second song that I'm picking, but it's off their fourth album, Life's Rich Pageant. And it's a song called These Days. It's the second track on the first side of the album. And I remember listening to it like, God, this is just so much more aggressive than what I had been used to. And I always felt like kind of an outsider, like I do in this video with my other friends, because they were listening to a lot of like harder stuff. They were into like metal and, more hardcore stuff. And this was the first album I felt like I could actually share with my friends. You'd be like, check this out. You got Begin to Begin, which starts off and it's just like blistering hard rock. And then These Days, which almost sounds kind of, it's got like a punk. I don't want to go so far as to say it's like thrash, but it was a lot heavier than anything I had kind of been exposed to at that point. And so I just fell in love with it. And, the lyrics, just like any Michael Stipe lyrics, you have to look it up. Like, what is he saying? I can't make out what the hell he's even talking about. But just a great 1-2 punch to start off this album. So R.E.M., this was the most recent R.E.M. album that had come out to that point. And so after then, anytime R.E.M. would put out an album, I would immediately buy it. Dead Letter Office was the next record, and then Document, which is sort of the album that introduced everybody else to R.E.M., but just loved R.E.M. And then the second band, it was funny because Josh and I were the first one to jump onto this Zoom chat before the video actually got started. And Josh was like, are you picking the Smiths? And I'm like, yeah, of course I am. And so I felt bad because I know Josh, that was going to be one of his top 5. And I kind of co-opted that. But he was nice enough to let me have the Smiths. And then I was worried Aaron was going to have the Smiths, but so far he hasn't shown them. So I feel like, it's pretty safe. But the Smiths were, I was like, oh, I'm totally into the, it wasn't called alternative back then, but it was like, I'm totally into, the indie new wave rock with R.E.M. And in high school, I met these kids and they were, kind of like your story, Chris, where it's like, well, I wanted to be a skater. I wanted to be cool, but I never was. I was so the polar opposite of cool, but they gave me a cassette of Hatful of Hollow to listen to, which was a Smiths album. And I'm like, holy shit, this is like a British R.E.M. There was so much of R.E.M. that I heard in the Smiths, and yet there was also a difference. But I think the thing that stood out to me the most was Johnny Marr's guitar playing. Johnny Marr is just a brilliant guitar player. He's melodic. He's so sophisticated. He's like a songwriter on the guitar. And it was just a perfect marriage because you had Morrissey's cheeky lyrics that were controversial at times, and they were wedded to just Johnny Marr's. And the thing that I always tell people is, like you can have a crunch to the guitar. And especially in like the early 90s, everything was like turn the amps up to 11 and just aggression and distortion and all that. But the beauty in Johnny Marr's playing, he's got such a tone to his guitar playing. And it's so melodic and it's so beautiful and it's so gorgeous at times. And you just want to listen because he doesn't try to, like knock you over the head with his guitar playing. But the first track that I am going to pick, and this is off the Meat is Murder album. It's the first track, The Headmaster Ritual, which is sort of like the Smiths version of, Another Brick in the Wall, part 2, which, he's talking about, the first line is belligerent ghouls run Manchester schools. And it's about just how the teachers and the headmaster, which for Americans is kind of the principal of the school, we're just very brutal and condescending and, really not very nice to the pupils. But the way that it starts out, and I've seen Radiohead do a cover of this song, and it's just beautiful. But, I keep going back to, well, it's like the song remains the same. And that's what this reminded me of, is it's sort of like the song remains the same, where he had this guitar intro, which is just so fantastic. And it's just like bombastic. And then he slows it down. And it gets into this melody, and then there's an acoustic guitar on top of the melodic electric guitar, and then finally Morrissey comes in with the lyrics. But it's gorgeous. It's one of the most perfect, to me anyway, pieces of pop rock in the 1980s. I love it. Could have gone with, and it's interesting to me that probably the song that most people are familiar with growing up, or at least in the 80s, was How Soon Is Now, which is on the American version, but it's not on the British version of this album. But that one was an iconic track of, the 80s. But off of there, I'm picking that track. And then the Smiths masterpiece, The Queen Is Dead, their most perfect album. I'm going with There's a Light That Never Goes Out, which is just another, again, epic Johnny Marr guitar showcase and Morrissey lyrical piece. And he talks about in the chorus, if a double-decker bus crashes into us, to die by your side would be a heavenly way to die. It's like, who talks about that? It's sort of almost like, Don't Fear the Reaper, talking about, well, if we die an early death, if I'm with you, then I'm okay with it. But this album really was a game changer in the 1980s, and it just really solidified the fact that the Smiths were a brilliant band. They weren't just a fad. They weren't a one-hit, and not that they had any hits over here in the States anyway, but they weren't just a passing fad, and they had staying power. And this is just such, I know Aaron won't think so, but this is a masterpiece of an album, and I love it. And you're not going to convince me otherwise, but those are my picks, as uncool as they may be.
Jeff, Johnny Marr is the most underrated 80s guitarist, I feel. Like, he's got such a distinct sound. It's so awesome and amazing and beautiful. And I love Morrissey's lyrics, and you're absolutely right. And both those songs are fantastic. So thank you for picking the Smiths.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry that. Thank you for letting me have them.
One of my favorite Smith songs is Half a Person, which is, I dig that too.
Oh yeah, no, I love that. It's such a vulnerable song too.
Call me morbid, call me pale.
Yeah.
And 6 years on your trail. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a mellow, and that's the, I love, Johnny Marr is not somebody who's like, oh, I'm flashy and look at me. I mean, his guitar perfectly suits the song, and he's not somebody, and I think that's one of the reasons why he's underrated, because he's not like, I mean, it's all about the song. It's not about Johnny Marr as a guitarist. It's about what mood, what tone, what texture, is going to enhance this song. Morrissey's all about Morrissey. I mean, let's get that straight. Morrissey's all about, like, it's all about me. He makes no bones about it. Whereas Johnny Marr is just subdued. He's like, okay, what do you need? And he's happy to stay in the background, but that's what makes the Smiths. And I love Morrissey's solo work, but there's just something missing without Johnny Marr as part of that equation. But anyway, now we're into our number one, our favorite band of the 1980s, at least I think so. So Chris, what do you got?
I am going with the mighty Iron Maiden, and two of my favorite albums by them, Power Slave and Somewhere in Time. This is an early pressing that actually Aaron gave to me. This is my favorite Iron Maiden album. I just love the futuristic feel and theme of the whole record. I like every song on this record, but I'm going to pick the song Caught Somewhere in Time. I was listening to it again today. It's just an amazing song. I know a lot of people would think Wasted Years off of this, but I like that song too. I was also going to pick The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, which I really dig too. But Maiden was untouchable around this time. I mean, they were just untouchable, unstoppable. Bruce Dickinson, just his vocal range. Their songs were epic and fast, and you had Martin Birch producing. It was just an amazing. And the song that I'm going to pick off of Power Slave, I mean, first of all, that cover is just amazing. Anything with an Egyptian theme is cool. I'm going to go with the song Aces High. Just a killer song. This happens to be, I'm just going to show this. This is a Castle came out with some Castle remasters of the Maiden CDs, and this happens to be a 2 CD set, and these are actually hard to find. And this has some bonus tracks: Rainbow's Gold, Mission from Harry, King of Twilight, and live version of Number of the Beast. So if you find these Castle 2-disc versions, pick them up. They're hard to find, but they're cool too, because you get all those bonus tracks as well. But Maiden, I mean, I don't know, Paul Di'Anno. I love the Paul Di'Anno years too. Killers, yeah, Gary, thank you. Killers is one of my favorite. Killers is probably second or third for me for Maiden. I love that record so much. Paul Di'Anno definitely had a different feel than Bruce Dickinson. So Aces High and Caught Somewhere in Time.
Some great picks, man.
Awesome picks. When I was talking earlier about my friend Matt that was introducing me to all that hard rock and the Twisted Sister, one of the things he gave me was a cassette of Somewhere in Time. And I remember seeing just the cover, and I said, I don't care what's on this, I have to love it. There's just no option. And to this day, my favorite Maiden album.
Yeah,
that's
and
a great pick.
Thank you. Yeah, and I like that Maiden is still recording. I just can't get into their newer stuff like I did back in the day. I mean, again, I think their albums are good, but I mean, you can't beat the classic years. All those albums up to probably
the Blaze years.
Yeah, I was gonna say up to Seventh Son. I like some songs off of Fear of the Dark. I like some songs off of No Prayer for the Dying. But yeah, you're right, Aaron. And then when Blaze came in, those are some killer records too. But I mean, anything from like the debut to Seventh Son is just amazing. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Those are all untouchable.
Yeah.
Yep. Stranger in a Strange Land is actually my favorite on that album. I love that stuff.
It's a good song too.
Oh man, that's an awesome one. Right. So am I up?
Yep.
You
It's
got
you,
it.
yeah.
So with going through and picking all of these out, this was the very first one that I picked that I kind of knew it was in there, didn't even have to think about it. When I talk about, again, that same time period of being introduced to all of this music, the second or third week that I'm in this, our new place, we have cable television for the first time. So I'm helping my mom clean. I'm 10 years old at the time. I'm vacuuming, so the TV's on, but the volume's down. And all of a sudden I see this guy's face, can't hear the music or anything. And I'm like, what in the world is that? And I turn off the vacuum cleaner, run over, turn on the volume. And it was the video to Eyes Without a Face by Billy Idol. And I just thought he was the coolest freaking thing in the world. You know, he has that intense look in his eye, the spike hair, and the lip starts doing the thing. And I'm just like, whoa. And that literally was my introduction to MTV, first video I ever saw. And right after that, it was With or Without You by U2, and then Hotel California by the Eagles. Those are my first 3 videos on MTV. Wow. And I so fell in love with that so fast. I told my mother the only thing I wanted for Christmas was this freaking tape. And there's a picture of me standing by the Christmas tree, 9 years old, with this Billy Idol Rebel Yell tape, and I'm happy as heck. And I have that exact same copy to this day. I still have that copy. It's been following me around for decades. But yeah, I mean, Billy is just absolutely fantastic. And Rebel Yell is definitely my favorite album. Love every single song up and down on this album. I love him so much. The other album I was going to show, which is Kings and Kings of the Underground, that came out in 2014, I left it on my turntable because I was playing it earlier. It's just like, that's just how much I love him. But my 2 songs are both going to come off of this album. And of course, it's Eyes Without a Face. And again, there's so many others I can choose from here, but I'm going to have to go with Flesh for Fantasy. And again, there's something about the intensity of Billy and what he does on those slower songs when he comes in with, you know, the look and the flesh, you know, it's just like, it just draws you in as a kid. It just like, that is a badass. It's just, this is a slow ballady type of song, but he's freaking bringing it. And you definitely can't underestimate what Stevie Stevenson's brought to the table as well. I mean, his creativity as a guitarist can oftentimes go it's easy to overlook it until you start listening to him actually go through and tell you and share, this is what we did and this is why. And then it's like, oh, wow, that was amazing. Like, how did you come up with that? But I think just in the context of listening to Billy on a regular basis, it can be hard to catch the genius that Stevens brought to the table. So just an amazing guitarist, and, you know, still putting out stuff with Billy to this day. So without question, this Rebel Yell just represents everything that was fantastic about the 80s to me right there. Yeah. So Eyes Without a Face and Flesh for Fantasy, those are my 2.
Great pick.
I love it.
Oh yeah, that's a fantastic album. You know what's funny is when you did that, when you said Flesh, probably all of us would do it the same way. We'd have our fist up. Flesh. Like that.
That's the only way to get it out right. I mean,
Yeah,
I know, that's totally how
so
I pictured
awesome.
when as soon as you said that song, that's what went through my mind. Okay, my pick, I was kind of going back and forth, to be honest. And Chris just kind of helped me not choose Iron Maiden. So I am going to go, because I thought, you know, I talk about this guy other times and stuff, but I don't care. I'm going to go with Bruce Springsteen from the 80s. Yeah. I mean, I can't help it. The stuff that he was putting out was just so fantastic. And you know, there's so many songs of his that I could pick, but I think the one that I'm going to pick off of this would be Tougher Than the Rest, just because I just think it's such a wonderful song about 2 people who are not kids, you know, they're older, they've been through, you know, different relationships. They've had bad relationships. They've been burned. He's talking to a woman who, you know, probably is scared to get back in a relationship. But he's saying, hey, you know, if you're willing to put your heart on the line, I'm tougher than the rest of all these guys. You know, I'll be here for you. Whatever shit you're gonna, you know, be going through, we'll go through it together. It's got that line where it said, you know, it ain't no secret. I've been around a time or two. I don't know, baby. Maybe you've been around too. You know, and that's great. You know, that line right there is just perfect. Bruce Springsteen's lyrics are fantastic. And he can say so much with so little words sometimes. And I think Tougher Than the Rest is just a perfect example of that. And then the other song I'm going to pick is off the album that actually got me into Bruce Springsteen. And that's off of Nebraska, which to me is, there you go, one of the best albums released in the decade of the 80s. And the song that I'm picking is Highway Patrolman, which is, once again, Bruce saying so much without beating you over the head with it. So you've got two brothers. One of them went to Vietnam. One of them stayed home. They got a farm deferment, so that they got to stay home. He didn't go to war, but you know, they talk about the crop prices and everything's just, they're losing money. So he becomes a highway patrolman. Eventually his brother comes back from Vietnam. His brother, when he comes back, he's not the same that he was. He's always in trouble. You know, he's got something going on. And the main character here, Joe, who's a highway patrolman, who, you know, his job sometimes is to rescue his brother, to get him out of these bad situations. And they keep, you know, he's got the lines in the song, you know, where he's basically saying, hey, it's my family. You know, somebody who doesn't stick up for their family, they're no good. Even though he knows his brother is no good, but he's got this guilt that he carries around. And it never really says what his brother went through. And the character never says that he has guilt, but you know he does, the way he keeps bringing that up. It's like he's telling himself, you know, man turns his back on his family, he's no friend of mine, and you know, he's telling himself this. He's talking to himself in this, and it's just, you know, he ends up finally, you know, his brother does something to somebody in a bar. All we know is that there's something bad. Somebody's bleeding. His brother's in trouble again. So this time he's got the lights on. He's following. He's chasing him. I think they're in Michigan, and he chases him down to Ohio or whatever the state is. And he shuts his car off and he watches his brother drive away. Watches the taillights disappear. And that's all of the song. And it's like, it's amazing.
Well, that's
It's
the
amazing.
hallmark of a great songwriter. It'd be easier to write a novel about that scenario than it would be a song.
Yeah.
I mean, take what you just told us and then be like, oh, write a song about it. It's like, write a song about it. How the hell am I going to do that? I mean, you're just giving me about like an hour and a half Netflix special, you know, with that.
Yeah.
I'm going to distill that into a song. But that's the great thing about Bruce Springsteen is he can take that, all that information you gave me sounds like, you know, it would take an hour and a half for anybody else to tell that story. But Bruce Springsteen to condense that into what's essentially like a 3.5 minute song. Like, are you kidding me? But
Right. Yeah.
That's his
And
gift.
you know, you've even got the love triangle aspect. You know, they talks about Maria. You know, he
Yep.
keeps remembering, you know, laughing and drinking, taking turns dancing with Maria. Well, Joe ends up marrying Maria. That's his wife. And then his brother comes back. So you've got that aspect too. So he probably has guilt with that. You know,
Yep.
Well, brother went off to Vietnam and I married Maria. So, you know, I mean, there's just so much going on in that song. Yeah, it could easily be a movie.
Yeah.
I think what's cool too is that anytime what makes a good song for me too is when Johnny Cash decides to cover your song. And Johnny Cash covered Highway Patrolman. And I want to go back to what JC had mentioned. JC had mentioned Tom Petty's Southern accents. Johnny Cash covered Southern accents as well. So two great artists, two great songs. Johnny Cash covered them.
And probably not the right place to get into for this particular video, but you know, someone who loves Bruce the way that you do and understanding the storytelling, I would be very curious at some point in time to hear what you felt about Western Stars, because I thought the storytelling in that was absolutely amazing. So maybe we'll chat about that some other time, but I would definitely love to know.
And I think, didn't Johnny Cash cover "Miss Me Blind" also?
He did. That was actually part of the reason why he was dropped from MCA. So.
There you go.
But since we're talking about Springsteen, one of my favorite albums by him is Ghost of Tom Joad, and storytelling on that album. Listen to the song Sinaloa Cowboys. That song kills me every time.
Yeah.
He's an amazing storyteller. Just gosh.
All right, Aaron, what song did Johnny Cash cover of your favorite band?
Well, is it me?
It's you.
I don't think any of them. But I'm going to hit you over the head. This is going to be a hit you over the head one, and great storytelling. One of my favorite lyricists, one of my favorite storytellers of all time. Huh?
W.A.S.P. Blackie Lawless.
Tom Bev.
Oh man.
Am I frozen?
Yeah, frozen.
Yes.
Yes, Wasp. And the reason I love this band so much is when I was growing up, when these albums came out, that same friend I was talking about, it was like me and him had this connection through W.A.S.P. and like we're the only ones that liked them. And Blackie Lawless, I still say, is one of the best songwriters ever, one of the best singers, got such a unique voice, and he can go this really gravelly, you know, metal voice, and then just really smooth choruses, and it's just amazing. And, you know, that was the first record from the 80s. Then he got The Last Command. And then the two I'm going to talk about, which is this one here, which is my favorite W.A.S.P. album, Inside the Electric Circus. And it's just amazing storytelling. The song Sweet Cheetah is the song I'm going with. I love it when your claws run through me. I mean, it just hits you over the head. I'm going the opposite. I'm hitting you over the head. And I absolutely love it. And every song on this, I just love, even the two cover songs, which are I Don't Need No Doctor, which was that Ashford and Simpson?
I think it was Rod McEwen.
Rod McEwen. Yeah.
That was Humble Pie, I think.
Yeah, you're probably right. I don't know why I thought that. And then Easy Living, which is Uriah Heep song. But every other song, you know, 95 Nasty, some of the best songwriting ever. It's just such a tender song. Absolutely, yeah. But this album here, growing up, me and my friend, it was like a secret thing, like you were talking about with your music. Like we're the ones that liked them. We were telling everyone how great they were, and nobody had listened to us. And then this album came out, and people started listening to us a little bit because The Headless Children is such a masterpiece. But I'm going to go with the Hit You Over the Head song from this, which is Mean Man, which I absolutely love. And it's about the guitarist Chris Holmes, who's actually a really cool guy, but really different. And it's got an amazing chorus with the gentle lyrics. But yeah, the song The Headless Children it's almost progressive, this album at times, which is amazing for W.A.S.P. It's where they started becoming more mature. Great stuff. They do that really cool version of The Real Me, the Who song. So they covered the Who on this, and it's really, really a great version. It has a killer bass player. Frankie Benali from Quiet Riot does the drums on this record, which is really cool. So I'm going Mean Man and Sweet Cheetah. And there we go.
So
Is there a
Aaron,
cover of Gordon Lightfoot's "If You Could Read My Mind" on that album?
Yeah,
Says with such a straight face too.
so Aaron, I
I
wanted
really-
to sorry, continue.
Go ahead. You wanted to what?
No, I wanted to ask you. I mean, you yourself being such a big Wasp fan, I'd like to know your take. What is the song "Animal F Like a Beast" about?
Well, it's about the best way to cook an animal over the fire pit.
Okay, I was trying to say it in a straight face like Jeff does, and I just
Yeah.
It's a hunting song.
That's amazing. I love that, especially, yeah. I really, I feel bad that I didn't use like someone like Billy Squier too. I think is really overlooked in this era.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And there's all kinds of, it's not just the metal. There's all kinds of artists that were great. Everything from, as Jeff was saying, like the Smiths, from there to Megadeth and everything in between, which is so why the 80s were so cool. Everyone had their own niche to get into,
yeah.
And have bands that they felt were their own, kind of like I am with Clutch, where it's like 15 years they've been like the band that only I know about, it seems like. And it's kind of that, I really like that aspect. And everybody had a band like that in the 80s, it seems like, where they were the one that, and it was something different for everybody, which made it cool.
Yeah.
Good pick, man.
Yeah.
So my number one is Springsteen. And I'm not going to talk about this album because Gary already did, and you did such a fantastic job. Because Gary, I was going to pick the same song you did, and
okay.
this is the album that got me into Springsteen, also, where I really fell in love with him. So I totally recommend this. But I also picked this album, but I'm going to pick two different songs because my three favorite Springsteen albums are "Tunnel of Love," "Nebraska," and "Darkness," and the order constantly changes. And "Tunnel of Love" gets the least amount of respect. And I think it's because Born in the USA was such a big hit that some people hate that album. Some people love that album. And some people think, oh, he got cheesy in the 80s. And that's totally not true. Tunnel of Love is a masterpiece. He was married. He was not in love with his wife. He was in love with Patty. He was going through a separation, but also at the same time trying to figure out who he was and what his place was. It was obviously a crazy point for this man's life. The two songs I'm going to pick, one is going to be "Brilliant Disguise," which I absolutely love. I found myself single in my 40s, and it fucked with me, guys. I'll be honest with you. It was wild because you just don't think it's going to happen. And then you start going on these dates, and you haven't been going on dates since the 1990s, and you're thinking to yourself, in the song "Brilliant Disguise," he sings this line. He says, "I hold you in my arms as the band plays. What are those words whispered, baby, just as you turn away? I saw you last night on the edge of town. I want to read your mind and know just what I've got in this new thing I've found." And it's like, you want to know, like, is this person real? Are they showing me some sort of facade? Because people can be fake. People can not show you their true selves or their true colors. But you don't know. And that's the idea of getting in a relationship, right? You're taking a chance. And it's friggin' scary. And that's what "Brilliant Disguise" to me is. It's a very vulnerable song, and I absolutely love it. And it's crazy that's on the same album that Gary talked about with "Tougher Than the Rest," where he's not vulnerable at all. And he's like, I'm tougher than all of the rest, right? It shows the insecurity that he was going through at this point in his life. And then the other song is "Tunnel of Love," where he openly admits that, entering a relationship, where I love the line in the song "Tunnel of Love," where he's like, it's just you, me, and all of those things that we're scared of. Like he says that, like, there's obviously three things in this relationship. It's you, it's me, and all of those things we're scared of. So for a rock star at the height of his career to make such a vulnerable album, I think is just fantastic. I absolutely love it. It's a masterpiece. When I stole my record collection, this was an album I didn't part with. That shows how much it means to me. I absolutely love it. Total love.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons why maybe it doesn't get talked about as much is because, obviously, like you said, Born in the USA was so big and so huge, and that album was much more subdued. You know, there are no big rockers on that, and also there's not very much of the E Street Band on that.
Right.
There's just like a few players here and there. You know, but Springsteen does that. It's just like the album Nebraska came after The River. You know,
Right.
I mean, I'm sure the record company was like, when Springsteen comes in here, this is what I want to be my next record. After he had this big rock and double record that was, you know, his popularity was, you know, still gaining momentum. And then here's this all acoustic record. They're probably like, what is wrong with you? You know, and I'm sure they probably thought the same thing with Tunnel of Love to an extent. You know, I mean, they're probably thinking, man, you just had one of the biggest records of all time, and now this is, you know, everything's down in it for the most part. You don't have any big rockers. I mean, Tunnel of Love was probably one of the most rocking songs on that album, you know. So, but he kind of does what he wants to do.
I think
No,
he
I was just
wants
saying
to
he
make
does what
more
he
of a
wants to do.
Nebraska album. I think in his heart of hearts, he probably wanted that to be more of his album, like what he did with Ghost of Tom Joad and what he did with Devils and Dust. But I think the machine was so big. That's why the band imploded after that. And he got all different musicians. Because I think that the machine was so big, he probably didn't know at that point if he could look at them and say, like, I'm making another Nebraska. You know, like, who knows? He must have felt the pressure and the weight of the success of Born in the USA.
Yeah.
I think something else that kind of kicks in with Born in the USA and Tunnel of Love is, you know, from an accessible standpoint, you know, definitely a lot more radio and pop friendly. And I think sometimes what got lost in that in my mind is there's so many bands, so much going on in the 80s, you know, the video rotation and all of that. And all of a sudden people were just listening to any type of pop melody and just lost the focus on his lyrics. Because like we keep talking about here, everything that Bruce does, it's about the amazing pictures that he can put together. So even if you have a song like Dancing in the Dark, which most people might argue is one of his poppiest type of things, when you actually go through and look at the lyrics, I mean, it is a very deep, scary, vulnerable, like all these things that he does in these other places, it's still right there. I guess just too much, not too much, so much of that poppy flavor from Born in the USA, I think just kind of had people, Tunnel of Love is just another one. It's just it's like, no, that's a freaking fantastic album. Go listen. Bruce is still right there.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think when John Legend covered Dancing in the Dark, people finally, at least some people finally took notice and was like, wow, that, even though that was a super poppy song, John Legend did it as a piano ballad. And it's like, those lyrics are amazing for a pop song. Yeah.
Powerful. And quite frankly, I have to be, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I have to be honest too, because even as much as I knew the song and kind of let it fade, it wasn't until I watched that movie with, what was the movie about the guy who was so inspired by Bruce Springsteen that?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
The guy from India.
Yeah. And there was that scene where he was
Blinded by the light.
Blinded by the light.
Yes.
And when he was sitting in his bedroom and just kind of, you know, envisioning his future and everything that was going on, and Dancing in the Dark was playing, they were putting the lyrics on the screen, and I was just kind of reading them, and all of a sudden that moment, as long as I've known that song, it took it to another height, because I was strictly focused on the lyrics, and I was like, man, he was doing Bruce, you know, amazing.
And what's weird is a lot of people don't like Dancing in the Dark. That's actually my favorite Bruce Springsteen song. Ever since I was a kid, I love the lyrics of it, and I love the song. I don't know why, and I like a lot of his stuff. But that's the song that really made me like him a lot, actually, which is weird because a lot of people think it's his worst, you know, don't like it like you're saying. And it's not cool to say it's your favorite song of his, but it probably is. And another thing, W.A.S.P really should have did a song called Tunnel of Love.
Yeah.
They could have done a really different version.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Right after
completely
Like an
different.
Animal. Those been a great A/B side.
Aaron, Dance in the Dark was the last song written for Born in the USA, and it was because they told Bruce, we love the album, but you do not have a single. Go back and write a single. And that's what he wrote. And it was his, I think it reached number 2. I think Michael Jackson was number 1 for like 4 years, but you know, it was his closest to a number 1 hit. So
Amazing.
Yeah, Born in the
I just
USA
saw
was
it-
one of the first cassettes I ever bought.
yeah.
But even when I was a kid, I like the lyrics of it. It's what drew me to that song. And that's not what most people paid attention to, but that's what I always got me with it when I was young. So it's kind of weird.
Gary, Jeff, did you pick Bruce Springsteen too?
No, I did not.
Everyone
Not
picked
because not because I don't like Bruce Springsteen. I mean, I do. But getting back to Johnny Cash, this band actually has a song that Johnny Cash covered. Believe it or not. But
I know who it
this
is.
is a band that I saw on MTV, and anyway, it's, again, I feel like such a outsider, even making this band my number 1, but I'm talking about Depeche Mode. That's my number 1. I've seen them 3 times in concert. They're my jam, you know, whatever. But I saw the first song that actually resonated with me on MTV was this one, Never Let Me Down Again, which is off of this album, Music for the Masses, which the title was meant to be ironic because the masses were never going to get into Depeche Mode. But I saw that video and I'm like, what, you know, and I'm trying to think back, like, what was it? What is it about Depeche Mode that even, you know, 30 years on or whatever it is, why are you still listening to Depeche Mode? Why have you not outgrown Depeche Mode? Why do you still go back to them and listen to them? And what attracted you at the time to Depeche Mode? And I think it was just because their lyrics, you know, they write love songs, but it's like a twisted kind of a love song. I mean, like, take a song like Somebody, where you've got all these cliched, you know, the first, you know, 3/4 of the song is all these like love cliches. I want somebody to care for me passionately. And when I'm asleep, I want somebody to hold me, you know, like, and kiss me tenderly. And then at the last line of the song is, you know, though things like this make me sick, in a case like this, I'll get away with it. You know, so basically he's been feeding, at least my interpretation of the song, he's been feeding all these lines to this girl that he knows she wants to hear. And he doesn't mean any of it. He's just trying to get in bed with this girl. And so he's telling her whatever it is that she wants to hear, just so he can get in bed with this girl, you know? And, you know, a song like Master and Servant, which is totally about bondage, or a song like Question of Time, which is about pedophilia, you know, just like all these, like, they take the standard love songs and they just twist them into like stuff I'd never heard before. And a song like Blasphemous Rumors, which is like a, you know, I mean, it's a blasphemous song. It's about how can God let all these terrible things happen? If he's such a loving God, how can he let all these like terrible things happen? And, you know, I just, at least at that time, I'd never heard anything like that before, but the melodies were catchy. And you had, you know, Dave Gahan and Martin Gore trading off on vocals. And it's just, you know, again, I talk about elevating synth pop. And I mean, that's what they did. They took like what, you know, just kind of standard, like, oh, Wham, or Pet Shop Boys, or Yes, or anything like that. And they took it to a different level, and they took it to a darker place. And that's what I think, you know, with me, that resonates about Depeche Mode, is they, you know, they weren't afraid to sing about taboo subjects, but it was very much in, you know, kind of a new wave poppy. It was all dressed up in danceable new wave kind of stylings. But, on an album like Black Celebration, where it could get very dark, any song on Black Celebration, you could imagine a heavy metal band taking those lyrics and reinterpreting them. But for Depeche Mode, it was just a different genre that they were doing. But so the first song, Never Let Me Down Again, is the first song that I'm picking. But then I'm going to go all the way back to their third album, which is Construction Time Again. And I'm going to go with Everything Counts. And it's like an anthemic sing-along kind of a song, but it's just talking about corporate greed and the fact that, it's almost like the song Dogs, but it's sort of like the new wave version of Dogs, where it's like, kill or be killed, and, stab, the person on the back to climb that corporate ladder. But I just love it. I don't know. I mean, Chris, you're a Depeche Mode fan, so I'm sure, you can weigh in on this, but, those are the reasons why I like Depeche Mode and why I still listen to Depeche Mode. And they have interesting synthesizer sound. They invented industrial music that Ministry, Nine Inch Nails would kind of co-opt in the early 90s, but that all started with Depeche Mode.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, coming from like the rock background and the heavy metal background, Depeche Mode had those dark lyrics, and their music was sort of dark, even though it was, like you said, it was sort of masked under this, sort of electronic upbeat type thing. But it was dark music, even though it was electronic and upbeat, and the lyrics were, lyrics that you could really, kind of dive into and take as you wanted to, and like really dig deep into them. Their melodies were great too. I mean, just think of their hits like Enjoy the Silence and, Personal Jesus and things like that. But yeah, they've always been a favorite band of mine as well. Then I was thinking about either picking them or The Cure. I'm surprised none of us showed The Cure. But I would kind of put The Cure into that category as well.
And their history, it's very similar to Pink Floyd, because with Depeche Mode, you had from Yaz, and Vince Clarke was the actual, person who started Depeche Mode. And he was their singer. I mean, he wasn't their singer, but he was their songwriter. He wrote all of the songs with the exception of one song on their first album. And he, started the band, and he pretty much was their main songwriter. And then after Speak and Spell, which was the first album, he's like, well, I'm out of here. I'm bored. I'm not going to do this anymore. And so, you had Martin Gore, who had to step up much in the way Roger Waters did and be like, okay, well, shit, we don't want to quit. We don't want to just give up. So he had to step up to the plate and come up with songs that were just as good as Vince Clarke had written on Speak and Spell. And not only did he do that, but Depeche Mode became way bigger than anything Vince Clarke went on to do, whether it was Yaz, whether it was Erasure. But they always reminded me a little bit of Pink Floyd, because they always had kind of that element to them. Even on like I showed Music for the Masses, there's kind of like these audio verite moments on that album that remind me so much of Pink Floyd and stuff that they used to do to segue one song into another. But yeah, I'm not ashamed to say, yeah, Depeche Mode is my favorite band of the 1980s, maybe 1990s. Maybe that's a stretch. I don't know. But at any rate, that's the one that I'm going with.
I think it's a great pick. I almost picked them as part of two of mine as well. And I mean, I think both of you already hit the nail on the head. It's just, it was that dark nature that they brought to their music, especially at a time when always define the 80s surrounding the synth as being colorful. That's always the word I like to put to it. You think about it's cool and it's okay to be the big star that's acting silly, that has on neon color this and everything else. You would never listen to a Depeche Mode album and get the impression that these guys are wearing neon yellow shirts and you know, sunglasses in the shape of lightning bolts, or, you know, just all the wacky stuff that was going on. It's like these guys are serious about something, and it's going completely against the grain of what everyone else is doing with the synth in the 80s. And it just hit a nerve with people, and it sticks with you. Awesome freaking band.
Yeah, and Jeff, I mean, like, even though I grew up in the 80s listening to metal, like, I listened to Depeche Mode, and I had friends that Depeche Mode was like their favorite band, you know, and obviously R.E.M, The Cure, those bands. I think that was a great part of the 80s, was that, yeah, I would have classified myself as a metalhead just because in high school, people would be like, what are you? I'm a metalhead. But I had, you know, I had Run DMC, I had Houdini, I had R.E.M. It was, you know, it's the same eclectic taste I had now, you know. I just didn't have a Depeche Mode t-shirt to rock. That was my issue.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I think Violator should have been called Music for the Masses, because that was actually their breakthrough album. You know, you had Personal Jesus, Enjoy the Silence, Policy of Truth on there. That really was the music for the masses, but they were just an album late, you know. And I think they thought, well, this music is never going to connect with people. So it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek title, you know, but they thought this music is never going to hit the mainstream. Nobody is ever going to get what we do. And then one album later, it's like, holy shit, they exploded, and, you know, kind of the rest is history. But well, anyway, we're about 3 hours into this video. Chris, you look like you got something you want to add.
Yeah, I just want to add one more band. If I would have had a sixth band, and this is kind of to go along with Depeche Mode, even these guys, even though they weren't really electronic, but the Jesus and Mary Chain.
Yes.
Just a killer band that a lot of people don't talk about, but Psycho Candy and Darklands, their first two records, and even Automatic, great. It's like the Beach Boys with distortion. It's really good stuff.
That's actually a good description.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we appreciate, Brandon, you joining us tonight. And hopefully you'll be joining us, you know, in the future. I think we behaved ourselves actually remarkably well. So it's sort of like, you know, when Billy Preston joined the Beatles, you know, during the Get Back sessions, it's like, we're all on our best behavior because, you know, we don't want to put them off. But yeah, so thank you guys, and love all your picks. Join us next week for another very compelling musical discussion. Hope you're all doing great, and everybody take care.